We have everyone in the meeting now. Good evening. My name is Yvette Janier Holder. I am the Executive Vice President for comto-ny. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. We have a great program ready for you this evening. Before we actually kick off, I will hand it over to our president, who will give us a nice intro.
Okay, thank you, Yvette. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Watson, the president of comto-ny. For those who are not familiar who comto is, I'll just give you a brief description of who comto is. We are a national organization, and we're recognized for our advocacy for leveling the playing field and maximizing participation for veterans, people with different abilities, and minorities. So I just want us to get into tonight's program, and I must say I am so honored to welcome you to our second of 3 events to celebrate women during this month. Tonight's program is going to be phenomenal. We are going to hear from 3 dynamic women who will share their perspectives about their travels and the way they navigated their careers in this industry. They are definitely recognized as generational leaders, and I'm sure they're going to share some great information about their travel and successes. And, you know, given that this is Women's History Month, comto-ny saw fit to reach out to these remarkable individuals to be here tonight and share their perspectives. So now I just wanted to say that I want you to tune into their bios, because you're going to understand why we wanted to highlight their contributions to an industry that moves this nation. So everyone, please sit back and enjoy this event. And I'm so excited. And you know what? I'm going to chime out because you know what? This is their moment, and I just want to enjoy it with them.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. So yes, this month is Women's History Month. And as I said on Monday when we kicked off with our first event, it's kind of hard to put all the contributions into one event that women have made in the transportation industry and elsewhere. The national theme for Women's History Month is Valiant Women of the Vote, Refusing to be Silenced. And we kicked off our first of 3 series with Women's Political Capital, Our Voting Matters. And we had 2 phenomenal speakers. One was Charlene Stanberry, who is a representative from Yvette Clarke's office. She serves as the Chief of Staff. And also Lakila Stemmons, who is the National Director for Higher Heights. And Higher Heights is a national nonprofit organization that focuses on women in politics, and particularly Black women in politics, being able to get them onto ballots and supporting them through the campaign process. Tonight's event, which, you know, I have the pleasure of actually having a combination of both public sector and private sector represented, and many of which who have actually worked in both areas. So the perspectives that we will hear this evening are very broad. We have one of our panelists who was unable to attend this evening, Ms. Adelaide LeGrand from Hillsborough Area Regional Transit Authority, but she does send her apologies. And so we will get her in on a future event, because she definitely had some great areas that she wanted to share with us this evening. And then our final series is actually going to be on March 30th. And that one is focused on women entrepreneurs in transportation. So with no further ado, I would like to hand it over to our facilitator for the evening, Ms. Rhonda Hogan-Brock, who serves as an advisory board member for comto-ny. Rhonda?
Thank you, Yvette. I'm going to begin by introducing the panelists and giving a summary of their bios. We have first Veronica Vanterpool. Hi, Veronica. Chief Innovation Officer, Delaware Transit Corporation. And I'll just say, I'll just put this in there. Before Veronica moved to Delaware, she was a member of the board of directors at MTA, which is Metropolitan Transportation Authority. So that's how I know her, from when. But now, as Chief Innovation Officer at Delaware Transit Corporation, Veronica introduces and supports changes that reduce barriers to transit use. Equity is a key focus of her work to ensure those most reliant on transit receive quality service. A native New Yorker who just moved to Delaware, Veronica is a recognized transit/transportation leader, given her expertise in the legislative, political, advocacy, media, and communication development sectors in the New York metro region. She's on the board of the national organization Smart Growth America, co-founder and president, WTS Delaware chapter. And I believe that's women's transit seminars, transportation seminars. Advisory member of APTA's Innovation Officer Peer Exchange Group, emeritus board member, Bronx River Alliance, and a former board member of, as I stated earlier, New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the nation's largest transportation network. I would even go as far as to say in the world. Next, I'd like to introduce Priya Jain, Executive Vice President, Chief Growth Officer, Atlas. As Chief Growth Officer, Ms. Jain is responsible for leading growth to develop market share and deliver sales results that support the long-term growth objectives of Atlas. With over 30 years of diverse experience in both private and public sectors, Ms. Jain's expertise is in developing and executing transformational strategies that drive profitable growth in complex and dynamic environments. She is known for her integrity, strategic and creative thinking, driving results, leadership development, and employee engagement in multicultural environments. She led Atkins' business strategy and growth efforts, including strategic initiatives and planning, client account management, client solutions, and digital innovation. After an early career as an engineer at CHTM Hill, which is Yvette's alma mater, Ms. Jain progressed in her career by taking on leadership roles in operations and business development in a growing and matrix organization. Ms. Jain was appointed by the board and CEO to develop and implement revenue acceleration strategies across the globe for all business units and regions. Ms. Jain serves on the board of the Civil Engineering Department of City College in New York. And lastly, but not leastly, I'd like to introduce Deborah Wathen Finn, President, the Wathen Group. Deborah Wathen Finn has 35 years of experience in transportation with effective leadership and innovation in public and private sector in transportation, infrastructure, and technology, and created revenue growth, improved market position, developed stakeholder support, and transformed operations. As president of the Wathen Group, Ms. Wathen Finn provides strategic consulting on strategic planning, crisis management, negotiations, transit and rail operational issues, and conducts business development for clients from startup to established global firms. Ms. Wathen Finn serves on various advisory boards and is active in community and trade organizations. She currently serves as chair of the Yarmouth, Maine Economic Development Advisory Board. Ms. Wathen Finn has received countless honors for contributions into the industry and community, including but not limited to Women of the Year for the Greater New York chapter in 1999. She is the first woman to receive the Greater New York Council of Boy Scouts Construction and Industry Transportation Person of the Year Award in 2005, and the Women's Builders Council Champion Award in 2008. And I can go on, but I'll stop here. She's well renowned and well honored. Now, I'm going to take you into the panel questions. And I'd like, I've had a battery of questions, but these are the ones that I think will be resonate with people who are tuning in to this event. As you look back through the years of your careers, respectively, what meaningful advice and guidance can you provide to those currently either at the beginning or midpoint of their journeys? I'm not going to call on anybody, but why don't somebody start us off?
I can start us off because so as I've been in this industry about 30 years, an engineer by trade, and as I look back on my career and I think about where I've landed, I think what's been really interesting for me is the different career paths I've taken and some risks that I have taken. And at some point, I would say it's like I felt like I was like a kid in a candy store. I can go do this, and I can go do this, and I can go do this, and I can go do this. And was at that junction in my career where I had to make a choice and say, where do I want to go? And because what I was realizing was I was doing things well, but there was no focus, right? So when you go and say, hey, who's Priya and what is Priya known for? That was missing. And that was an interesting conversation that I had to have with my board of directors. I had to kind of look back on myself. And I remember one of my mentors saying, you have to sit back and say, what is it that gives you your high in your careers? And what is it that gives you your low in your careers? And most probably it's going to be the same thing that's going to give you a high and that's going to give you a low. And sit back and reflect on it and then go figure out. And at the same time, be flexible, because sometimes you go down a certain path and it may not work for you. Be adaptable and flexible to go change it. So I kind of, and again, I'll personalize it a bit, right? I have a 26-year-old who started on her career. And interestingly, I'm having a similar conversation with her and saying, go try out different things, but at some point you will have to go make a choice where you go focus. So.
I'll jump in next. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to comto-Ny for welcoming me back into the New York family. Even though I'm in Delaware, I'm always a New Yorker. So I'd like to spin a little bit off of what Priya said and tell those, including myself, 20 plus years ago, that it's okay to not know what to do next. And what's interesting for me about that particular comment is I was always very structured. In high school, I knew what I wanted to major in college, and I did. When I graduated from college, I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, and I did. When I graduated, I knew I wanted to have a career in the environmental field, and I did, and I started that. And so I was very organized, very focused, very structured. But it wasn't until mid-career that I never really knew what the next step was. And those of you who know me from my New York advocacy work know that I used to run a nonprofit based in New York City. And I left after 10 years, not knowing what was next, in fact. And I was okay with that. So whenever someone is asking me now, what do you want to do next? I don't have an answer for that, because I am just looking at an opportunity that is presented to me and comes my way, and weighing the pros and cons. And in fact, that's actually how I ended up in Delaware. I didn't seek this job out. This job actually came to me. And I never envisioned that I'd be in Delaware, but it's worked out really well. So it's okay to not know what's next, but to take that risk and understand that there's something to gain from making that move, even if it's not necessarily aligned with what your vision originally was.
Okay, I guess it's to me. I'll just
Yes.
build on that because it's kind of, we all sort of tell the same story, but in a different way. I think that what I was told and what I've used as my own sort of messages as I've moved forward in my career is look for opportunities. Be there ready to say, I'll do that when there's this project. Be the one that's willing to volunteer. I found early on in my career, I was in public life for 25 years. There aren't enough people to do all the work, right? Well, there never is enough people to do all the work, but in public, there seemed to be a lot more opportunities, even in junior levels, to take on more responsibilities because there weren't that many people to take on those kinds of opportunities. And the other thing that I always tell young people, and I actually my dad taught me this, is think about building the portfolio. What is it that we're doing? It's kind of what Priya said, it's the narrative. What's your narrative? But I learned early on to just be thinking about what was I achieving? What was I accomplishing? So I could not just say, oh, I had this job title, because it didn't really say it, but start thinking about what you were delivering. What was the achievement? How did you change where you were and to make it better? And the other thing that I think has always sort of framed what I've done, it's network, network, and network. And not for yourself necessarily. What I have found is the opportunity to network. I mean, I was one of the people that helped create the New York chapter of WTS and was one of the first presidents, right, of that wonderful organization. Like Comto, great networking. But it was to also help others. So you learn from people below you, next to you, and above you. And then as you're going through your journey, you have people to turn to that are in a safe setting to get that advice. So I would say, look for opportunities. Don't be afraid to volunteer. Build that portfolio. Think of it as your artist portfolio and network. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, ladies. Next question. What one thing would you tell your 20-year-old self, if I knew then what I know now, or, and on this one, I'd like, well, everybody has answered, so we'll go another round of everybody chiming in. And you want to start us off?
I'll start
yeah.
you off since I was at the end. You know, the 20-year-old self, you know, I talked about networking, but when you have these opportunities, seek advice and support. One of the things I wish I'd done more of, believe it or not, because anyone who knows me knows I'm such a networker and I have a great repertoire of people to reach out to. But when there's really challenging times, I would have wished I had reached out more to get advice on some changes I made, some moves I made. I didn't enough, I think, because I thought that I could do it myself. And I think and when you're 20, you think you can do everything, right? But anyway, that's my advice to myself when I look back and think about what I could have done differently.
Thank you. You're
Maybe
up next.
Okay. So what I would tell my 20-year-old self is a successful career is not synonymous with making a lot of money. So when I was 20, I was hell-bent on being an environmental lobbyist, but on the right side. I actually went to school for environmental science and policy. So my degrees and my early professional background are in environmental work. And that was how I ended up in transportation work, because the organization that I ended up being executive director for was trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by promoting alternative modes of transportation through transit, through walking, through biking, etc. So that's how I landed in transportation. But I wanted to be an environmental lobbyist and make a lot of money and be in that, you know, private sector world, and have spent most of my career in nonprofit or public sector. And many of us know that it's not the most lucrative sector. It certainly hasn't been for me, but I certainly look back on my career years, and I'm still a mid-career professional, and attribute a tremendous amount of success and redefining my metrics for success. So that's what I would tell myself at 20.
Okay.
So, I kind of think about, Deb, what you said, right? It's very similar experiences, but we all approach it differently. And as you were talking about the networking piece, it was like, man, that just resonates. And the same thing, where do you end up going? And I'll kind of say, I think when I was 20 years old, I would always sit there and question myself. I don't have a passion. What am I doing here, right? It's like you always hear, go after what you're passionate about. What do you love doing? And I would always question myself and say, where's my passion? Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm trying to do here. And interestingly, what I realized was that passion really evolves over time. Again, kind of going back to, right, if you look at it as a portfolio and we say we are looking at different things to add on to our toolkits and we are trying things out. So it's okay for you not to have a passion. I'm envious of people who know what they want to do when they were in high school or when they were in elementary school, high school, and they're still doing that and they're totally thrilled with it. I've made peace with the fact it's okay for me not to have passion. And what I think I wish I had known that before. I learned about it later on in my life, where I started looking at what did I not like doing. Rather than saying what did I like doing, I started narrowing it down to what did I not like doing. So as a 20-year-old, I think if I had to go back and give myself advice, it's okay for you to go try out different things. And then, by the way, be very sure, start looking at what do you not like doing, and then slowly your passion will evolve. And it's okay to have multiple things that you like doing. Think of it as a portfolio. Everything that you learn adds on to your toolkit and makes you the person you are.
Okay. As a woman leader, what additional challenges and/or biases have you come across, and how did or have you navigated them?
So I'm happy to jump in. So when I was working at the advocacy organization in New York City, I was often the youngest person around the table, the only woman of color, and one of maybe 2 or 3 women around the table. And these were tables with commissioners and governors and mayors and legislators, business people, etc. And it was often a challenge to have that room at that time be respectful of a young person's opinion. And I had to learn very quickly, and in fact, it became a bedstone of my advocacy, that facts were incredibly important, and knowing information inside and out was incredibly important to building confidence and trust in colleagues. And it was a lesson I learned very early in my career, being at these tables, but also being very comfortable asserting myself. So I would do things such as sit in the middle of the table, not at the edges and not along the wall, because I belonged in that space. So, being confident and assertive in that way, knowing that I had as much to contribute as those who are more seasoned than I was. So that was an early lesson for me, and an early bias, again, being young, but also being a woman of color and a woman at these decision-making tables.
Veronica, that's so interesting what you said, right? Own it, right? It's like, hey, there's a reason why we are there. And there are times I still have to remind myself and say, I should be proud of the success. And the reason I'm here is because I can do what I need to do, right? So thank you for bringing that up. I would say biases, right? And again, we all have our pivotal moments in careers. And it's interesting, if I look at my pivotal moment, it came like 15 years into my career or so, and there was an opportunity that came up, And and at that time, my kids were little. So I had my two daughters. One was in 6th grade and the other one was a junior, actually a sophomore in high school. And this opportunity would have required me, I live in New Jersey, would have required me to be in Denver, pretty much commuting back and forth or being there and not being in Denver, not being in New Jersey. And it was a very, and how did I even find out about that opportunity? One of my mentors, right, going back to that advocates and network and everything else, one of my mentors called me up and said, hey, here's this opportunity. Would you like to take this one on? And I did end up applying for it. I got selected for it. And later on, I found out some of my supervisors had arbitrarily made the decision. She's married. Her husband's the primary breadwinner. She's got young kids. She's not the right person for this job. And it's like, nobody even came up and asked me. I was doing what I needed to do. I was really doing well in my job, but the bias of, hey, here is this woman. And by the way, she will never end up agreeing to do that. To me, it's like the choice was taken away. And interestingly, I did get that job, commuted every week. And interestingly, when I got there the first day, here were the questions that were asked, and I'm being very, very transparent with you all. The questions were, well, you must not be married. No, I'm married. Well, your husband must be a stay-at-home dad. No, he's not a stay-at-home dad. Well, you must not have kids. No, I have kids. Well, and I think they ran out of questions at that point. And I remember calling up my husband and saying, I cannot, during this entire time, I cannot look sad. I have to always have a smile on my face, because guess what's going to happen? People will say, oh, she's not doing her job because she's missing her family. So it's interesting that you don't think that those biases exist, but I think we do get pigeonholed into different places. And for me, I think it was more surprising that the choice was taken away more that, and if there wasn't an advocate or a mentor who had not said, hey, it looks like there's an opportunity, I think you'll be really good, I wouldn't have even found out about it. So.
Did everybody go on that one?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay, Deb.
Oh, that's a book. You all, those were great responses. So I like the question because it says, as a woman leader, the challenges is bias. So what I'm thinking about is I progressed very fast up in the Port Authority, in executive levels, in staff functions, but I had a dream, and it was that I wanted to run an agency or an organization. And I did get to those dreams, but I left the Port Authority at a great time in my career there. And I went over to New Jersey Transit, that I was actually on the team that created it, fresh out of grad school. So I had a special attraction there. But I went to the railroad. And if you want to know, anyone that's worked in those kinds of cultures, they are, first of all, there are hardly any women. I mean, back when I was doing stuff, there were a few women in transportation. That's why we started WTS and Comto, right? Stuff like that. But in rail operations, and they said that I would get a chance to be in operations. That's why I left the Port Authority. And I eventually took a lateral and became superintendent of a commuter rail line. I had never, everybody else who's a superintendent had been an engineer, a conductor. You sort of get the message, right?
Yeah.
And here's somebody, masters, well-trained in leadership and management. So I had to hunker down, learn it. I knew how to run an organization. I had done a lot of research about customer-driven strategies. And so I used those techniques to sort of turn around a very badly run line. There were all kinds of things that happened there. There were all kinds of bias events that happened. It was the worst run, the lowest on-time performance, lowest safety, employee satisfaction. And so this is what a woman does when she goes out to this. I created employee engagement like they had never seen at New Jersey Transit in the rail operations. I included we did customer satisfaction surveys. I even had the coach cleaners talk about how we could make the equipment look better. You get the message. We had safety committees that were employee run. And all of a sudden, the numbers, we had the best on-time performance. We had the best customer satisfaction surveys and the best safety records. And I'm jump starting, but over a period of like 9 months of listening getting employees involved, and holding people accountable. There were things, I remember one engineer goes, "Oh, you just want to play hardball," because I called him on his stuff, but I did it in a professional manner. And I remember going, "Uh-oh, what happened here?" But it was, I studied how to deliver that kind of service. I listened. There were a lot of people that wanted me to be successful, as well as people, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the hair-raising stories of things that happen out in the field that were not easy. I also sought alliances with people who had been there before me. And Shirley Delibera was the head of the agency.
Oh, really?
Yes. And she's a dear, dear friend of mine
Oh, yeah.
to this day. But she also was somebody that she has worse stories. Oh, I can't,
Oh,
I mean,
please,
between being a woman and a minority,
Trailblazer.
her story is.
Right, Yvette? You know, we talked about it.
But so this is what happened. So there were clearly biases, but you know, it was wonderful. I learned a lot. And I showed everyone that I could run a railroad, that I could do it. And then I went up and got promotions. And then many of you know, I went on to run the transit system up in Western New York. And when I got there, I was told it was a postal office organization about to implode. You know, remember postal office workers that, and you know what? I was the leader. And I could have gone in there and like read the riot act, but I knew I had to help bring tools to all the different levels out in the field, how you talk to each other. I brought in a conflict resolution trainer who taught these people, these, you know, the folks out in the shop, how to talk and disagree. And all of a sudden the posters went away, you know, the anti-racism remarks, women. And it wasn't me walking. I mean, I walked around and I saw it and I knew which shops. I could tell by grievance, number of grievances, safety, you know, injuries, rates of injuries. I could tell where there were bad pockets and we turned it around. So it was like, I had to get through it and know what everyone else thought. But when you're called to be able to be a leader,
right?
I used cultural and employee engagement and training. And I remember, I'm going to end on this. I remember one of the training classes for the frontline employees, and it was conflict resolution. And he came up to me privately one day. He saw me, I guess I was riding his bus or something. And he says, "I have to tell you, my marriage is so improved because of that training I went to." He's telling me this incredible story about his relationship with his wife and his kids. But he was also doing better at work. So anyway, that's just sort of my story about a short version of it, but we're called to that after we've been through it.
Yes, yeah. And I tell you, you know, the MTA was founded in, I think, 1954. So we're going, yeah. And I tell you, you know, for the most of the years that they've been in existence, they really have been a paramilitary, male-dominated, organization. And you really, I'd say within the last maybe 15 years, where you see females of, you know, across the wide divide of ethnicities, you know, taking non-traditional roles as, you know, track workers and, you know, bus operators and, you know, and tower operators. And, you know, you'll see more of a gender balance, you know, on the operating in a lot of the operating, you know, positions at the MTA. So, you know, we've come a long way, ladies. Now this is an engagement question. It's kind of centered around engagement. You know, you've told different, you know, your views and your experiences at, you know, at various points in your career. Now let's talk about something in the converse. Based on the challenges that you have faced, you know, the biases that you have overcome, what do you do to open up the pathway for other women to advance their careers?
I can start off with that one. I would say I end up approaching it from a mentorship standpoint. So I know we talked about mentors and advocates. I do. So when I look at careers, there's a couple of things which I know what gets measured gets done. So let me kind of put like 3 bullets, right? One is what gets measured gets done. So every time I know I've been, as a senior leader, what I've been putting in place is with organizations that when we end up having any openings, let's make sure that we have a certain number of women or minorities apply for it. Now, again, they're not going to get a job just because they are of a certain gender, but let's make sure that we are making a very conscious effort to, and some of it is based on, I don't want anyone to be in the situation that I was in, that nobody even gives you that option, right? So this forces people to really go look at their portfolio or at their succession plan, or at candidates who may not, and this forces them to go and take charge of that. Second is around reverse mentorship. I'm a strong believer in, yes, I want to be mentored by people, but I also have people who are younger people who are a request to mentor me. Couple of reasons. One is selfishly, I get to know what's going on with the next generation, because the reality is I'm at that point where what I thought as a 20-year-old is very different from what the 20-year-olds or the 30-year-olds think now. Second is that allows me to get to know them. And it's typically, I'm biased a little bit. I do tend to go pick up women mentors or women, younger women. And I say, come back and mentor me. But flip side of it, that allows me to mentor them. And then they end up becoming part of the succession planning discussion. Right. So I'm kind of, it's a little bit of, as I said, selfishly, I get to learn, but flip side of it, I help them go do it too. And then the third is I do end up engaging externally quite a bit and working with under the STEM programs, or even, and again, I'm using STEM very just because of the fact that's in colleges and things like that, where I work with STEM programs. And I have a nonprofit that I've started, which I end up focusing on education, because again, a strong believer in, let's go figure out who's out there in other industries. Who are those people out there that you can bring into your organization to go create that diversity of thought? So those are some of the things that I have ended up doing.
Sounds like a win-win for all.
I'll jump in now. Well, of course, I spend a lot of time mentoring, whether it's through formal programs, through the WTS, as a volunteer in leadership at my college. People who have worked for me still call me and ask for advice. So all of those, and I've always been a big supporter of WTS's mentoring program, and New York has one of the best, actually. But what I did when I've been a leader in any organization, first of all, I look at my organization and make sure, because I do believe at the depths of my soul that the most diverse team is the strongest team. And you just get some thinking that you won't have. And so I've always tried to look at the baseline when I get there and look at how I can, look at that with opportunities. But one of the things I did because it's great as leaders, we can say we'll do this, whatever. But what we really want to do is build capacity and model stuff. So one of the things I did when I got to Niagara Frontier was I had the executive team, my direct reports. When we were getting ready to do reviews, I would have all their direct reports. I would have all my direct reports have a conversation as part of our staff meeting on a quarterly basis about the talent that we had. Because somebody could be in service planning and they express an interest in maybe going to operations or do marketing or whatever, and start to look for opportunities so we can keep moving those folks along. Look at those, high potentials. And so it was really interesting because what happens sometimes, it's like Priya's point, someone didn't ask, or somebody who's in another department knows that person informally. They may have even mentored them, right? Informally. So people start saying, well, what about Susan, or what about Joe or Maria? And so we actually started doing some cross-fertilization. And it was also, and it's also how I then found people to then eventually have a very diverse team. And I have this great picture of last week I was there with my team, and it just was a great diverse group, and they were just so talented. And they used to say to me, I never would have had that chance. Nobody would have given me the chance, because it was a very male oriented structure, which isn't surprising because that was in 1998 into early 2000s. So, you know, most of our agencies were still, and especially in the middle management, going on up. So those are some things that that I've done. Oh, and the other thing is, you know, that I have a consulting business. I actually hint around at my clients about, or I'll try to be a key communicator about talent that I'm seeing, you know, or showcase them in something. Because sometimes, particularly in the more traditional areas that we work in, they might not have realized that, or get that person to go do something on a volunteer basis so that they get that, they can show that off in a trade meeting. Anyway, just some of the things I've done over my career. Great question.
Well, we're just approaching the last question. What was a mistake you made, and what do you wish you had done differently? I'm quite sure you can say more than one, but we'll just we'll just say one. What was a mistake, ladies, that you made, and what do you wish you had done differently? And I'm gonna ask Veronica to start us off.
So I didn't get a chance to answer the previous question, so I'm gonna just
Oh, you
piggyback
did?
off of that for a second, but I'll go right into this, Rhonda.
Okay,
So-
sorry about that.
No worries at all. No apology needed. So I've been very fortunate to have a lot of support from women in my career, and that has lasted for a very, very long time. And those were essential models for me in terms of interacting with other women that I've really carried through and emphasized throughout my career. I am very big in supporting, bolstering, emphasizing, highlighting my female colleagues' accomplishments all the time. And it's a beautiful circle of support. So much so that I wanted to make sure that when I got to Delaware, I could continue to promote that. So I was a member of WTS in New York, which is a very strong chapter. Immediately noticed there wasn't a chapter in Delaware and started founding it. And in record time, in less than 5 months from concept to ratification, we became a chapter. But I specifically reached out to women and women of color within Delaware Transit Corporation with a personal plea to say, it's important that your voice is represented. I would like for you to join and be a member. Because it was important to provide that very inclusive invitation to let some of my colleagues know that they were welcome and wanted in this new organization. But then, you know, I think there's some very key messages that I try to promote just broadly. It's important for me that people know that I am Latina, particularly in Delaware. So in Delaware, many people don't know that I'm Latina. But in New York, as soon as I open my mouth, not only do they know that I'm Latina, they know I'm Puerto Rican and they know what borough I grew up in, which was the Bronx, right? But in Delaware, most people are not familiar with me being Latina. So it's very important for me in a leadership position in the state to let people know that I am Puerto Rican and I am obviously a woman. And so that is important. And then lastly on this topic, it's important for me to be accessible to a lot of women who have questions. It does not matter. For me, if you want to reach out and talk and email, I am always going to take your call. I'm always going to respond to an email. For me, it's not about, title. It's about learning. And I love Priya's point about mentoring up and down, right? There's so much that we can learn from others. It's not about age. It's not about necessarily experience or years of experience, I should say. And I really value that. So to now answer Rhonda's question quickly, there's not a key mistake that resonates for me, that jumps out for me. There's not so many things that I would do differently. I have tried to learn by example and by model to be very measured, very calculated, and very deliberative in a lot of the decisions and choices that I make. There's always lessons learned for sure. And I love always learning. I'm always in a learning mode. And I think good leaders are always learning. You can't be a good leader and ever stop learning. So I would say I don't have mistakes that or regrets or things that or actions that I think were so pivotal for me. But I will say that I'm always learning on how to do things better, and I'm always watching for ways that I can make improvements, because there's always things for me to improve. So I'm always watching everyone and learning from everyone in order to make those improvements personally and professionally.
Thank you. And again, my apologies for, yeah. All righty. That leaves you, Priya.
Okay. That was an interesting thing that you said, Veronica, about there are lots of little mistakes. There's no one thing that stands out per se for me. And to your point is you have to constantly keep on learning. If I think about, I'm sitting here and thinking, is there no, you know what, I can't come up with anything that's pivotal as far as one big mistake, wish I had done this differently. I would say, could I put it in the context of taking risks, and those risks that I took worked out well. If they hadn't worked out well, maybe I would have said, hey, there was a mistake that I ended up taking. But again, going back to what Deb, you were saying, look at it as a portfolio. So every risk that I've taken, I don't consider it as a mistake. Or if it hadn't worked out, I consider it more as it just taught me something different. So no specific mistake. And totally, I think it's all about learning and observing. And my recommendation is don't look at your career as I want to get to the next title. I mean, at the end of the day, you do work in an organization. And yes, to get to a seat at the table, you do need to quote unquote look at how does the organization fit in, but look at your career journey as what are you adding into your toolbox, and then make sure you have a narrative that you can say, here's why I'm the one who can do this for you. And when you get to that place, own it. There is a reason. I kind of go back to how I started, own it. There's a reason why you are sitting in this position or in this seat.
I did make a mistake.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because it's still spanning, did you make any mistake?
Yeah, no, and in fact, it haunts me sometimes as I reflect on my career and I mentor people. So it's very personal, but I'm sure people can identify with this. Sometimes we leave a job, we take the next one just to get out of the one that we're in.
Yeah.
And I wanted so badly to be a general man. This is very personal. I haven't ever talked publicly about this one. I wanted to be general manager of a transit agency, and I was on and I loved that job. And there was a very difficult chair of the board who was actually, he's now since passed away, so I'm not going to say his name. But he was notorious for treating people with great disrespect, particularly women. And I eventually just felt like I couldn't succeed there, but I mean, I had all the numbers, so there was no way, but I took the easy way out. That was sort of when remember when I said starting off on this discussion, that's when you use your network and you go and you seek advice and alliances, because once people knew I was leaving, they were very upset and they were like, what can we do? And I was like, it's too late. But it's really particularly when you get into leadership, sometimes you have to deal with very difficult people, although you do at every level, but it's pretty dicey and it's high stakes. But there are so many women and men that want to help you. And if you have, remember I also said network at the lowest levels as you're coming up, so you can turn to those people. Just use that reservoir, especially if you've gone back and forth and helped others. I can't reinforce that enough. And when people are in high levels and they're talking about leaving, I'm like, oh, are you sure you really want to leave? Is that really why you want to go? Because it's really challenging when the higher you get. You want it, but it's hard work.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's a stretch, it's a reach,
Watch what you wish for. What do they say? Watch what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly. Be careful what you wish for. Yes.
Be careful what you wish for.
And Deb, just a point, right? I think you highlighted something which, as you were talking, it came back. I was sitting there and thinking, at the end of the day, we work with people. So the culture, and if you don't get along, you'll never get along with everyone. But to me, it's all around, right? Just who are you working with, and are you really having fun working with them? And if you are not, the title may not hold much weight, because at the end of the day, it's about the people that you're working with. So
That's a very good point. That's an
Yes.
excellent point, Priya. You know, and I say that because I'm recruiting right now for several directors, and you know, the tiebreaker was, is that person going to be a fit, because I have to work with them closely.
Yep, absolutely.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, we have 7 minutes, and I want to do something fun at the end that Yvette passed on to me, and I'm going to call it a lightning round. She called it a rapid fire, but it's still the same thing. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and you know, in no particular order, just, you know, shout it out. Favorite celebrity?
Madeleine Albright for me. I have a buzzer. I'm going to buzz as we are talking. Madeleine Albright. I had the pleasure of meeting her, and she's an impressive woman.
Next.
Well, I would say our vice president. I'm just,
Everybody's just taken with her.
Nice. Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Yes. And Veronica?
I don't have celebrity crushes. Even as a kid, I had no posters. I didn't care. I'm still that way.
I love your free spirit. You just, I love it. What is your pick-me-up? What motivates you when you are low?
Oh, for me, that's old school salsa music. If I'm
All
in a
right
bad
now.
mood, there's just certain songs. It's a certain era. It's, you know, it's the
It's
60s.
Hunts,
to
it's
the
Hunts
70s.
Point.
Yep. Castle Hill.
I can like
It's just
too.
about that era. It's the melody. It's the rhythm. Always gets me in a good mood.
All right. Okay. Debbie?
I would say exercising, working out. If it's in the summer, I'll go paddle boarding. If it's in the winter, I'll
Oh,
snowshoe.
wow.
I mean, just if you're in nature, it just like puts life in perspective.
That's true.
With some music, Veronica.
Right.
I was going to say the same, gardening and music, right? That is what gets me back up.
So elaborate. I was going to say Haagen-Dazs.
I was going to say a bottle of wine, but I said, let me just be a little bit.
I hear you.
Wine, and I'll use
Yeah, wine would be after I finish the paddle boarding. And
Yes. Well, I can relate to all three, but Debbie, I'm in that camp because I walked the new Goethals Bridge not too long ago, and I felt so accomplished
oh,
and exhilarating, and you know, it was just a good experience, and I'm going to do it again. So I'm into exercise as well. And last shout out.
Lightning round.
A book that changed your life.
So this is a weird book, but this is a book that I always end up going to when I'm feeling a little bit. Who Ordered This Truckload of Dung? It's a book by it's a spiritual book with like really nice vignettes and nice stories, which are life stories. It's by an author called John Drum, and I'll put it in the chat box. That's my pick me up in terms of just like the life lessons that are out there, and they're just explained so beautifully.
Ladies?
One book that was very impactful, not so much that it changed my life, but very impactful for me, was The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, about the Great Migration from Southern Blacks North. And it was beautifully written, very emotional, but it was also very factual, and I'm drawn to those types of materials. So I found it very moving, very awakening, but also personal, because my partner, his family is a product of the Great Migration, and had a very similar story. So it was, again, very moving, and not a story that I had not known, but the way that it was shared and told, and its foundation in fact, which is so, I love numbers, data, facts, statistics, was very impactful for me.
And Debbie?
Well, I actually spend a lot of time reading leadership books and historical novels because I always like to sort of figure out, leadership styles. So there's tons. I mean, I love anything Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote because she wrote, the Team of Rivals and so many things. But the one thing that when I've had highs and lows, one of my dearest friends, who's somebody in our industry, gave me the Book of Gratitude, and it's a devotion every day, and it's secular. It's when I really need a fix, I turn to that, and I'm like, okay, I need to get that book out. But what other book is, which I'm really into, is the Dalai Lama Bishop Tutu book that just came out on joy. Well, it's been out for a couple of years. It's fabulous. That is a very moving book. I think that's going to be the new book I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I have 3 new books I have to try and fit into my schedule.
Okay. I'm going to tell you, and I was debating, but a book that changed my life is the Bible. And I don't read it every day. It's not a novel, but I do refer to it. I go to it, to certain chapters and verses. So, and I guess that'll be for the rest of my life. But I want to thank, this has been very nice. It's been very quaint. And I want to thank, first Yvette for asking me to be the moderator. And it's great, some of you I didn't know, but it's great to see Veronica. Yes. And, I hope I want to thank you for, your time. And, I'm going to turn this back over to Yvette.
Yeah, I'm blown away by all of the tidbits. I was sitting here trying to, every time you see my head drop down, I'm writing another tidbit down because, anytime you walk away from a conversation, I always say you should feel differently. And there were so many different things that you guys shared with us this evening. And I just want to, just run through a few of them. Don't be afraid to try different things. It's okay not to know what the next step is, right? I think a lot of us always wonder, like, how is somebody going to feel if I don't have an answer to that? And so thank you, Veronica, for sharing that. Be the one who is willing to volunteer. I mean, that was one of the major reasons that I joined both WTS and Comto. I didn't know why I was joining. I just knew someone invited me, and I just kind of listened, and I sought out where the gaps were, and I figured, I have those skill sets to fill in. So I welcome everyone on this call. I talk to my team all the time, and I say, never look at your job description to determine whether or not you're going to do something. Because when you do something, you learn it, you master it, you take it with you wherever you go. So, it's all about what do you want to build as your foundation. And then I also heard network, not only for yourself, but also to help others. Look for those opportunities. Seek advice and support, particularly when you're in a challenge. I know I hit that one head on quite a few times, and it's like, gosh, why can't I do this? Ask. It's tough sometimes. Success does not always equate to a lot of money. I mean, that kind of says it all.
Veronica, yeah, that's right on the money.
Yeah, sometimes you cannot put a dollar value on something that someone has done or the way you've made someone else feel. And I just think that those things that's priceless. Own your presence. I sit in a room quite often, I'm in IT, and quite often there's not enough women around those tables. And, just being there and making sure that you're earning that respect and making sure that people recognize that what you say should not just be repeated by someone else for it to be heard. And so that was very powerful. Be prepared to shift your the mindset of biases when you face them, right? Because listen, especially in today's world, you know, we have so many things that are, there's so many biases that are out there. And for so many years, you know, a lot of them were covered up nicely. Now the cover has come off, and we're seeing a lot more of them, some to expectations that probably surpass what we would have thought were still, you know, as brazen. The mentor-mentee relationship, right? And it is that up and down, right? You learn from each other. But I really appreciated the portion that you brought in on sponsorship, right? People need sponsors. People need someone who is going to reach out to them and say, hey, here's this opportunity. I think it would be great for you. And also talk about individuals who you know have done certain things, and they would be great for certain opportunities that you hear of. And then finally, the last one that I wrote down was build capacity and models that you can repeat. You know, in program management and project management, we do that all the time, right? It's repeatable cycles, but you have to be flexible because every project is different. Every program is different. Every environment is different. So although they're repeatable models, they're also very flexible and adaptable. So I would like to thank each of our panelists this evening, personally on behalf of comto-ny. Thank you so much for your input, your participation. I'd like to give a shout out to the gentleman who joined us this evening as well. Thank you very much, because together we make a whole.
Okay.
Rich, anything that you want to say to close us out?
I just enjoyed it. I loved it. I appreciate everything that was shared this evening, and look forward to doing this again.
All right.
You know, and I have my takeaways too, and I put it in the chat box, right? It's like seizing your opportunities to network. It will help you build out your portfolio. That will help you build up your network professionally and personally, right? And be confident, be assertive. And for the men that were on the call, we were brave, so be brave as well.
Oh, yeah, some of us don't have to be that brave. Just good.
All right,
good,
appreciate it.
Good to see Priya. Good to see you, Deb.
Greg, it's great to see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I was
The guy that shows up at WTS for
yes,
years. He's
I
been
was
with
I
us
was a
stalwart.
WTS advisor for many
Yes,
years,
he's
and so I enjoyed it.
so good to see you.
So men do make contributions, so that's
They
good.
do.
We do.
And New York chapter is one of the most diverse.
Yes. Priya,
So
good to see you.
Good to see you, Greg. Hey, you,
All right.
you connected us, right?
Veronica, I never had the opportunity to meet you, so you know now we're connected. I'll reach out to you.
Yeah,
Please
yes.
do. Please
Good to
do.
see you again, Veronica.
Okay.
Thank
See you again.
Nice to see you, my New
Okay.
York family.
Call me sometime, Veronica.
I will.
Thank you,
Rhonda.
everyone, for joining.
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Good night.
Thanks for
Stay
great
safe.
Don't forget to join us on the 30th. Take
Good
care.
night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Yvette and Rich.